Hello and welcome to my 2025 quarter 4 book review. In the last quarter, unfortunately, I only read 3 books. But in good news, I liked them all, mostly. Enjoy! The first book I read this quarter was A Night in the Lonesome October by Zelazny. I read it as part of a book club with some coworkers. It is a realistic fantasy novel told in 31 short chapters, one for each day of October. The book club and I tried to read one chapter a day to keep pace with the calendar, but I will say that having one chapter assigned every day felt a lot like homework, and I hate homework, so I did fall really behind and then have to catch up really fast. I feel like the novel might have been more enjoyable had I not done that, but we will never know. Before I go any further, a quick warning. This review will be very spoiler heavy. The book deliberately introduces terms and concepts without explaining them first. And part of the fun is piecing together what's really going on. So if you want to go into this book completely blind, now is your chance to click away. Okay, now this is your double last chance to click away. The story is narrated by Snuff, a highly intelligent and opinionated dog who lives with his master Jack. While Snuff describes himself as a watchdog, his duties are far stranger than that. He guards supernatural things bound in mirrors, chests, wardrobes, trunks, a circle, and he assists Jack in dangerous nighttime work that we aren't explicitly shown or told about. But first spoiler, Jack is most likely Jack the Ripper, so you can sort of extrapolate what nighttime work they were doing. As October unfolds, Snuff gradually reveals that Jack is one of several occult practitioners participating in an ancient ritual known only as the Game. You just lost the game, by the way. Every few decades during a specific cosmic alignment ending on Halloween night, these players prepare for what's called the Great Work. They gather ingredients that we aren't really told about. They draw power from ley lines that are geometric patterns laid out by the, geography of their houses. And they maneuver against one another in secret. The players are divided into two opposing sides. Openers, who seek to open a gate that would allow some bad thing, maybe like an elder god or cosmic horrors beyond our comprehension, into the world. And closers, who seek to prevent this and keep that gate closed. Jack and Snuff are closers, but it's unclear why. Obviously you would expect people to want to keep the gates closed, but if Jack is meant to be Jack the Ripper, why did we make him a good guy? Each player has an animal companion who act as spies, messengers, negotiators, and sometimes saboteurs. These animals are fully sentient and politically savvy, forming alliances and trading information independently of their masters. They can also talk to their masters, but only at midnight to 1 a.m. As Snuff patrols, he uncovers betrayals, murders, false players, and shifting allegiances. Snuff himself even forms an alliance with an opener, Greymilk, the animal companion of a witch named Crazy Jill. I have to take a picture of my dog because he is so cute right now. Hi, buddy. Also, my other dog is snoozing with a toy in her mouth, and I'm gonna try to get that too. Though filled with horror imagery and Lovecraftian mythology, the novel is surprisingly warm and humorous. A lot of the humor comes from the dialogue, which is almost always polite and civilized, even when the characters are actively plotting murder or, the apocalypse. This politeness creates such a contrast between how events are discussed and how horrifying they actually are. There is also the contrast between domestic routine and cosmic horror. Elder gods and ritualistic murders coexist with tea visits, shared meals, walks, naps. This creates such a weird vibe where the supernatural feels both absurd and unsettlingly close. For example, there's a situation where Snuff is worrying about his sore little paws and missing naps while dragging a corpse to a river to dispose of the body. This is a weirdly significant amount of the book, is this poor puppy just dragging this dead police officer, which just made the whole thing so funny. and unsettling. I really liked this tonal tightrope walk because it kept the book engaging. It never becomes relentlessly grim, but it also never trivializes its stakes. At its heart, the novel is about obligation. As I mentioned in the summary, Jack and Snuff are bound by a curse. The game predates its current players, and it kind of seems like many of them don't even really want to participate, but they have to for some reason. Specifically, an example is Crazy Jill the Witch. Jack tries to convince her many times over dinner and lunches that she should join the closer's side, and she says no, but those that have read the book know that when ultimately the closers win, Jill seems pleased, and her animal familiar, and Jack and his, all four of them, run away together into the night. So it doesn't even seem like she specifically wanted the gates to open. She just did because she's a witch. Confusing character motivation. But back to my original point, even though these characters have these specific obligations, the novel shows how personal choices still matter. Again and again, characters are faced with certain decisions: who to protect, who to trust, and how far loyalty extends when survival is at stake. The openers and the closers are ideological enemies, but both the players and their animal companions form friendships that cut across those divisions. Snuff, for example, repeatedly chooses compassion over strategy. He helps Greymalk an opener even when it puts him at risk. Snuff also withholds or shares information not based solely on advantage, but on a personal sense of what's right and wrong. He likes the fairness in trading. He doesn't just freely give his information away to other closers, they have to trade him something that he thinks is of the same value. And he doesn't not trade information with openers simply because they're openers. He makes the same deal with them. These choices suggest that even in a world governed by ancient rituals and cosmic forces, individual morality still matters. Snuff never claims to be a hero, he's just kind of doing his job. His work is patient and unglamorous. He's a watchdog, guarding thresholds, monitoring things, calculating patterns, and noticing what others overlook. He complains about his work in a man I need a vacation kind of way. Snuff's heroism, if it can even be called that, lies in his endurance. He keeps going despite exhaustion, injury, fear, and mostly because he knows that if he doesn't get the work done, no one else is going to do it. Telling this story through Snuff was so amazing. I loved it from the start, mostly because it was just like a little doggy, just kind of doing doggy things. Snuff is observant, he's dryly funny. His perspective really reframes the horror through practicality. Ritual murder is only worrying because it draws attention. Elder gods would suck to be released because that would really disrupt some routines. I really liked him as narrator because without him, the stakes of cosmic horrors being unleashed is a really unattainable concept, but looking at it through his eyes, the stakes are really personal and not really that abstract. I don't want the little doggy to lose everything he loves, so therefore I want the gate to stay closed. Despite what I said in the beginning about the day-by-day structure feeling like homework, I actually think it works really well. Each chapter kind of felt like a journal entry, which did make me picture Snuff either putting a pencil in his little mouth and writing it down, or trying to clamp between his paws. If dogs could write, would they do it like this or this? Early entries feel playful and mysterious, while later ones grow heavier as alliances fracture and the violence escalates. It was really impressive how much Zelazny was able to fit into such small chapters. The chapters are sometimes, in my opinions, way too short, but each one felt important to the story and helped build the atmosphere of the world. And because of that brevity, no single moment felt overwhelming. Instead, tension builds through repetition. Small details that were introduced early, like roots, those things in mirrors, circles, trunks, whatever, objects, relationships, all gain increasing significance as October progresses. By the final stretch, the reader feels the same sense of compression and inevitability that defines finds the game. Each chapter also opens with an illustration. The drawings themselves are cartoonish, but also a little unsettling. Here are a lot of the examples. They're almost exaggerated in a way that feels deliberately wrong. They blur the line between whimsy and menace, visually echoing the book's balancing act between comedy and horror. Together, the structure and the illustrations create a feeling that something is always a little off. The book never lets you forget that even the lighthearted moments are all part of a countdown, and that beneath the charm and jokes, the ritual is moving forward one day at a time. So far, I've only touched on Jack and Crazy Jill, who are like Jack the Ripper and a witch, but the rest of the cast is drawn from myth, classic literature, and folklore. For example, we have the Count, who is most certainly Dracula, the Good Doctor, Frankenstein, the Great Detective, Sherlock Holmes. All of those guys, along with witches, druids, necromancers, and Lovecraftian cultists, all coexist as weary professionals just kind of going through the routine. These aren't like fresh-faced monsters reveling in chaos. They're seasoned professionals treating the end of the world like an obligation. I also really like watching how the relationships between these different characters formed. There's one specific moment near the end of the book that I really enjoyed, where all of the characters come together at the dead of night in a graveyard, and they're all looking for like different ingredients for their things. And so somebody will be like, hey, I need a jawbone. Somebody else will be like, oh my gosh, I have an extra jawbone, and toss it over to them. And it doesn't matter who's opening, who's closing. They're all treating the game with like a lot of respect. And they seem to all want it to be a fair fight, because if they didn't, they would just probably take the opportunity in the night to just start offing each other. But it's just like, they're all coworkers who are trying to like help each other out a little bit. It was very cute. In the book's dedication, Zelazny lists a number of authors and classic horror filmmakers who clearly inspired the characters. As I said before, Good Doctor is most definitely from Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, and you can see where a lot of the other ones came from too. One that I thought was a really fun pull, if you will, was the character Larry Talbot, who is a werewolf. He isn't given a title like the Count or the Great Detective. He's just Larry Talbot. But his name is taken from a different Larry Talbot, who is a werewolf in the 1941 Universal film The Wolfman. The cast feels like a gathering of literary descendants. Like if Disney's Descendants franchise was not about the children of Disney characters, but instead was about all of the like Halloween horror guys all hanging out. I liked it quite a lot. I think this is a book that would really reward a reread. There's probably a ton of foreshadowing that I didn't fully catch the first time through. Maybe next October I can do a reread read-along with y'all. Let me know if that's something you'd be interested in. I really loved how the book mixed horror with genuinely cute moments. Yeah, there are all these corpses and danger, but also, like, sometimes the cute animals are just being cute animals. There's a specific moment where Needle, the bat companion of the Count, breaks into Jack and Snuff's house because, spoiler, Count is burnt to a crisp. And instead of Jack, like, kicking Needle out, he just accepts him in and gives him some fruit, some water. He's just, like, very nice to him, as one would be if they found, like, an orphaned bat in their house. Or I guess what I would do if I found a cute little orphaned bat in my house. I feel like a lot of people would just try to toss them outside. That is to say, just like these little details really stuck with me and helped form this like cozy, safe atmosphere, which doesn't make sense because literally trying to bring about the end of the world. I will say the ending was kind of anticlimactic. I feel like I put so much work into reading about these people setting up for the ritual, and then the ritual was over so fast, which did initially make me give it 3.5 stars. But the book ends with such a funny line, and I wouldn't be surprised if it was the inspiration for the entire book, so I did ultimately rate it 4 stars. Hi, sweetheart. Put your head here. Hi. Oh, goodbye. You can come up. Hi. Good boy. High five. Oh, good trick. This side. Yes, good boy. The second book I read this quarter was The Silent Woman by Minka Kent. It's marketed as a psychological thriller, though whether it fully earns that label is something we'll get into. The novel follows Jade Westmore, a successful author who recently got married to Wells. Wells is charming, wealthy, and most importantly, he's the grandson of a legendary Hollywood actress, Viviette Westwood. Westmore? Westmore. I think it's meant to be a reference to Vivienne Westwood, so I keep mixing up the names. But he is the grandson of Viviette Westmore. Their relationship started when Wells saw one of Jade's biographical novels that she authored, and was so impressed by it that he reached out to her to write a biographical novel about his grandmother. After a dinner where Jade's knowledge about his grandmother impressed him so much, the two started dating. Then Jade's life changed very quickly. She lands a lucrative contract to write Viviette's biography, with a clause allowing Wells to cancel it at any time, and from that she receives a six-figure advance. She also marries Wells, and moves into West Haven, Viviette's sprawling estate. Preserved almost exactly how Viviette left it, the house contains all of her books, journals, and other belongings, which Jade is very excited about because she loves looking through people's stuff. Even with this seemingly perfect life now, Jade struggles to feel okay and at home. More like she's a visitor in a museum, which I think makes sense because Wells wants to turn the house into a museum one day. But West Haven has another resident, Sylvie, Wells's first wife. Sylvie lives in a caretaker's cottage on the property and is attended by visiting nurses. Sylvie was found face down in the pool 3 years ago with a severe head injury. Though Wells tried to save her, Sylvie suffered major brain damage and now has limited speech and mobility. She now remains in a near catatonic state, and though Wells divorced her, he doesn't really trust her care to anyone but himself. Notably, police were never able to determine if it was an accident or if she was attacked. The Sylvie thing is not a surprise to Jade. She knew about her going into the marriage, and she's totally fine sticking to Wells's rule of Jade cannot go visit Sylvie because they're afraid it would cause a lot of stress for her to find out that she is divorced and he has a new wife, which, I feel like that would be a pretty stressful situation. So, plausible deniability on him not letting anybody buy her. But of course, that boundary is eventually broken. When Sylvie's nurse is suddenly called away, it falls onto Jade to make Sylvie breakfast and give her all of her medications because Wells is away on a business trip. The encounter is deeply unsettling. Sylvie is almost completely unresponsive until she sees Jade's wedding ring. Her wedding ring is an heirloom of Viviette's, much like how Sylvie's was a different heirloom of Viviette's. Sylvie puts two and two together and realizes Jade is new wife, and it is very stressful to Sylvie, so they were right on that. She tries to speak, cannot, and is able to scribble out the word run. Jade is obviously shaken by this, but decides to keep it to herself if she doesn't want to stress Wells out. There's a big theme of, I'm not going to tell somebody about this because it might stress them out. And she also keeps it from Wells because she's like, what if he's the person I'm supposed to run from? She doesn't know exactly what Sylvie was meaning. Her doubts about Wells also deepen when she befriends a neighbor named Portia. This is off topic, but Portia was probably my favorite character because she's very funny. She's just kind of like a gossipy, chatty neighbor who revealed all of her secrets within the first 20 seconds of meeting her. But Portia tells Jade that when she knew Sylvie and Wells, Wells was very controlling over Sylvie. And this is nothing like the man that Jade married. As the inconsistencies pile up, Jade begins to suspect that Sylvie is far from catatonic. Jade goes and investigates Sylvie's past and the circumstances surrounding her injuries. Nearly everyone becomes a suspect, including Wells, his guilt-ridden mother, Mary Claire, Portia, Portia's adult son, Portia's husband. I think that's it. The author tries very hard to have all of these suspects that aren't Wells, while all the evidence points to it being Wells that hurt his wife. And Jade, throughout the novel, will continually try to find a suspect that isn't Wells. But spoiler alert, it was Wells. And Portia's adult son, but he was kind of tricked into it. It's a long story. It's quite literally a long story. But yeah, bookends, it was Wells. The book had a three-part structure, and I really enjoyed this aspect. The novel opens to the present from Jade's point of view, then part 2 is Sylvie's from 3 years earlier, and then it goes back to Jade's in the present. The middle section in particular I found very effective. It allowed Sylvie, the titular silent woman, to reclaim her voice. In the first part, we only know Sylvie through the perceptions and judgments of others, painting her as this gorgeous, passive philanthropist who is a little broken. She was running from her past, and as a result of all of that, quiet. But when we shift to her perspective, these assumptions are almost immediately challenged. Part 2 reveals her awareness and intelligence, showing how flawed and biased the other characters' interpretations of her have been. The flashback culminates in Sylvie's injury. We see the so-called accident play out, though Sylvie doesn't see the perpetrator, so we are still left with a third more of mystery. We also get to see the relationship between Sylvie and Wells, and Sylvie and Wells's mother, Mary Claire. The three of them have very tense and complicated dynamics. I did like that it heightened the suspense of the novel. It also gave us a clearer picture of some character motivations. And then when we switched back to Jade's point of view, it made all these revelations more impactful. Kent's writing style is straightforward and easy to follow, which made the book a very quick and accessible read. I found the descriptions vivid but not heavy-handed, which helped the pacing feel more brisk. But I think what also helped make it feel like it was going very fast is it all felt familiar. Like this was a story you had maybe read before. The story just felt predictable. Like I said in the summary, it felt like the author was fighting against the plot being obvious. Wells in particular is framed so heavily as a red herring that I did start believing that he must be a red herring, because why is the book so long? Wells in particular is framed so heavily as a red herring that I started believing that he didn't do anything wrong, because that was just so obvious from the beginning. Like, this guy has his catatonic first wife completely under his control medically. It very much reminded me of The Yellow Wallpaper. Check out my last quarter video if you want to hear some of my thoughts on that book. But the overemphasis created kind of like a paradox. The novel kept me questioning what was going to happen, while also telling me the answer. So by the time the big reveal arrived, it lacked the punch that I was hoping for. The book keeps making you think that some big major twist is going to happen, but then the resolution is so abrupt and underwhelming that it just kind of felt like I wasted my time a little bit. So great job writing a suspense novel. I was very suspended, but the payoff just didn't match the tension that was built. The mystery is centered on two women who loved, married, and were betrayed by the same man. Wells's biological mother, Mary Claire, and his grandmother turned adoptive mother, Viviette, were also pivotal in the story. Jade is intelligent, observant, and methodical in her research. As she digs into Wells's past and the truth about Sylvie's injury, she faces obstacles that make her reconsider her own assumptions and her approach. She's pragmatic, persistent, willing to confront uncomfortable realities. Sylvie, by contrast, is initially presented as passive and nearly voiceless, but her first-person part reveals her depth. And despite her injury, she's far from helpless. She perceives much more than those that are around her are aware. We do get an epilogue where we get to learn more about Sylvie's time being in this 3-year vaguely catatonic state, in which we learn that she became slowly aware of this medical abuse that was going on. Because Wells was drugging her to keep her catatonic. I think I forgot to say that, but that is a plot point. And even though she was being drugged and was catatonic and had major brain damage, she managed to start hiding the pills that were making her brain foggy. And that's how she was able to communicate to Jade that she needed to run. So she wasn't just very passively waiting for someone to come rescue her. She did play a part in her rescue. Sylvie's sections really restored her agency and showed how misleading appearances can be. Mary Claire, Wells's mother, is a complicated figure. She surrendered custody of Wells to Viviette because she was a teen mom who wanted her own life. And now she has to live with the consequences of those actions while she struggles with her relationship with Wells and the women in his life. Her actions are often morally ambiguous, and it isn't actually clear on whose side she's on until the end of the novel. I don't believe her still that she was on the girl's side. I'm still pretty sure she is anti Wells and anti his wives. She's just a very strange character that I don't know the point of her or why she was in the novel, other than sometimes she drives people around. And by sometimes, I mean twice. Viviette, the legendary Hollywood actress and Wells's grandmother, looms large even in her absence. I'm pretty sure she's an example of haunting the narrative. Her legacy, preserved meticulously in West Haven, shapes the ambitions, behaviors, and obsession of nearly every character. Viviette seems to have hated her daughter, Mary Claire, just for being born, which definitely draws a parallel between how both of them felt about their own child. As Viviette didn't like Mary Claire for being born, Mary Claire didn't like Wells, but Mary Claire had her mom to give Wells to. I really liked that even though all four women were kind of at odds with each other, the real enemy was male influence. Jade is a likable and sympathetic protagonist. Readers naturally root for her, and I actually didn't really get that frustrated for her ignoring the warning signs about Wells. After all, who wouldn't want to believe this fairy tale romance even if it seemed too good to be true? Her determination to uncover the truth makes her admirable, as does her refusal to become a silent woman herself. She actively pushes back on the manipulations around her, which is empowering in a story that is so centered on women's agency. That said, character development is one of this book's weaker points. Despite spending so much time with Jade, I don't know her, and that's true for pretty much every character. There isn't enough space devoted to exploring their inner lives, which makes the plot a lot less impactful than it could be. I just don't know any of these characters well enough to know if this is a positive ending for them or a negative ending. Again, I still don't understand Mary Claire as a person. There were some characters, for example, Portia, the neighbor that gossips a lot, who, like I said, explained her whole life story immediately. She opened with, "My husband's cheating on me, but I don't care because he's rich and I want him to pay for my children's schooling. And if I call him out on him cheating on me, he'll call me out on our kid isn't actually his kid, it's just mine." And it was kind of funny. I found Portia a very funny character, but it was just sort of light entertainment for the rest of the novel. Jade starts and ends the book largely as the same person. There's very little personal growth shown over the course of the novel. The three original Westmores, Viviette, Mary Claire, and Wells, bring a very interesting texture to the story. Wells grew up in the shadow of his very famous grandmother, and he has this fraught, complicated relationship with Mary Claire, his mother. And Mary Claire has her own fraught and complicated relationship with her mother, Viviette. But these dynamics are never fully explored. For example, Mary Claire is initially portrayed as cruel and neglectful and just really mean to Sylvie. But then later she's like, "I was just being mean to you so that you'd leave my son because I was trying to protect you from him." And then in one of Viviette's diaries, Jade reads that Viviette is afraid of Mary Claire and describes her as monstrous even though she's 14 years old. And we just never circle back to that. So Mary Claire is both this horrendous 14-year-old and also this lady who's trying to protect women from her son and decides the best way to go about that is just also be awful to the women. She's she thinks she's a girl's girl, but she's not at all. I found these contradictions really interesting, but they were underdeveloped. It left me wanting more clarity and nuance. I honestly would have been fine with this book having nothing to do with Sylvie or Jade and really just exploring this complicated family dynamic. But instead, we get Every character underdeveloped. The most development was Mary Claire just being weird. And I think in the epilogue, Portia has left her cheating husband. But like I said, Jade starts, successful author, ends, successful author. Sylvie, I guess, does start as the silent woman, catatonic, but then she's not anymore and she's like living with her mom and going back to school, I think. Nobody fact checked me on that. It was just kind of like disappointing to want to get to know these characters and the author just not let you. This wasn't like a bad book or anything. It remained very readable, which is a nice way of saying probably below my reading level. Not to brag, but I am literate. But it just kind of ended up feeling familiar, like a book you've already read before. Like in the same way that all Hallmark Christmas movies are the same, like woman from big city go small town, meet or reconnect with small town man, learn the true meaning of Christmas. It was like that, but like trying to be a horror movie. It was entertaining enough to keep me flipping the pages, but it didn't quite deliver the shock, tension, or psychological depth it promised. It was enjoyable, I did finish it in one sitting, but if I wasn't writing this review, it wouldn't have lingered in my mind. I gave it 3.75 stars. Dead Things Are Closer Than They Appear by Robin Wasley is the last book I read this quarter and my final book this year. I will start by saying that I absolutely loved this book and I immediately put it on my favorites shelf on Storygraph. The book follows Sid Spencer, a Korean American adoptee who's living in the tourist town of Wellesley. Wellesley was built on top of a magical fault line that is meant to seal away dangerous magic. Despite living on a magical fault line, Sid's life is rather ordinary. She works at a coffee shop, navigates lingering hurt feelings from a broken friendship, and feels slightly out of place in her own skin and family. Of course, that dangerous magic that's sealed away in that fault line gets set free. Magic floods the town. There are earthquakes, tremors, magical forests spring up, and separate Sid from everyone she knows. Basically, a magical apocalypse breaks out. For some reason, I was really not expecting this. I usually don't read descriptions of books, which is probably why I read so many I don't like. But I wasn't expecting this book to just be like modern tourist town America, but magic apocalypse happens. This is a really interesting concept to me, and probably why I enjoyed reading it so much. I am going to spoil the type of apocalypse it is. I really like this book, so I'm like hesitant to give it away. But there are magical zombies referred to as shells that crawl out of the opened fault line. So, magic zombie apocalypse. I was somehow surprised when dead things became closer than they appeared. When the fault line opens, Sid is alone at home. She ventures outside and witnesses a neighbor getting killed by one of the shells. Sid manages to trap this shell in her basement. There are a bunch of other things that happen, but without giving away too much, Sid winds up in a group of a bunch of other kids her age. All these characters know each other, so it's not like a ragtag misfit group, because they've all lived in this smaller tourist town their whole lives. But basically, she teams up with them because she has the same basic goal as these other kids. Number one, survive. And number two, find her missing brother. Relevant? All of these kids are her brother's friends, kind of. It would make sense if you read the book, but like, he is in league with these people. Similar, I guess, to a Justice League. And number three, close the magical fault line back up, which this group of teens is able to do through a series of events that I will not be getting into now. Also, kind of fun, because this fault line has opened, people in the town are just kind of getting superpowers. I don't want to give away too much because I really liked this book, and I loved discovering things as they unfolded the way that the author intended. And I want that feeling of discovery for you. I've probably already given away a lot with the zombie thing. Sid Spencer is the heart of the story. She's funny, self-aware, awkward. Her narration is packed with dry humor and really sharp observations. She never loses her personality despite, like, the actual apocalypse going on. I have a ton of highlights from this novel of things that she said or just like internal thoughts, just because I find her such an endearing character. Sid remarks in the story that she is one of only 4 Asians in Wellesley. Her experiences growing up in a majority white town like Wellesley adds a lot of layers of like realism to her perspective. We do get to meet 3 out of the 4 Asians that she mentions, one being her, The second is her brother, who is also adopted. And the third is another character in this like teen group that's trying to save the town. We might have met a fourth, but honestly, I don't remember them. Something I also liked about Sid is that she's not a traditional chosen one. She's brave because she keeps trying, even when she's terrified or outmatched. She doesn't have like plot armor. Every experience that she survives feels like she put in the effort to do so. One defining aspect of her character is her inclination to do something kind just to be kind, even when that kindness won't change the outcome. Her compassion just makes her incredibly easy to root for. Going along with this not a traditional chosen one is that Sid's life is just ordinary. Like I said in the summary, she just kind of works at a coffee shop and has a rivalry with her ex best friend and her ex best friend's new boyfriend that was also her friend, which is surprisingly a very interesting plot point. But I loved that she had meaningful relationships with a lot of the other characters, and not just her love interest or her best friend, which is something I feel like a lot of YA books end up doing, where main character has two important relationships, love interest, best friend, sometimes a third one where it's a family member, but I feel like the family member usually fits the best friend thing, unless you are reading City of Bones, in which the family member also fits the love interest category. If you know, you know. Also gross. But those who have read it know also not gross. I don't feel like getting into it right now. We are focusing on this book that I love a lot and not City of Bones. But like basically, Sid's character was just so endearing. I found her very real, very relatable. She makes silly mistakes, but I don't get frustrated with her for them. They feel like mistakes that I could see myself making and are not just there to stall the plot. She was a well rounded character, and I feel like the Sid we met at the beginning of the book is not the same one that we end with. She has a considerable amount of character growth in just one book. The supporting cast is also great. Each character feels distinct and memorable. Brian in particular stands out. His story is not dependent on Sid's story. He's a character who's carrying around a lot of exhaustion and guilt over something that happened before the book started, and he has a very believable protectiveness over his younger siblings. And it's not just in the like, I'm big brother, I must protect little sisters. It's more of like, spoiler alert, our parents just died in a horrific fire, and CPS is trying to take my younger siblings from me because I am in high school and I can't support all three of us. But I don't want to lose my sisters because our parents just died and I don't want to lose the only family I have left. And believe it or not, this is not a problem that Sid can fix, which is another reason why I liked his character so much. His arc doesn't resolve with like his parents coming back to life or something like that. Spoiler alert, but his arc resolves with him coming to terms with his grief. I also liked how you got to see his relationship with Sid develop like naturally, or as naturally as it could in an apocalypse. And he also had relationships outside of Sid. He's friends with her brother, which is why he has invested interest in finding her missing brother. He's part of the larger group that Sid joins, and has different interpersonal conflicts with the other characters. I don't think I realized how much I liked Brian until I was filming this. But to get away from just Brian, because honestly, most of that was not even in my script, I was just kind of freestyling. The main group of characters as a whole just is very well rounded. They really embody the found family trope. They're all brought together by circumstance and not choice, and they end up having to learn how to rely on each other. Sid's adoptive family is also beautifully portrayed. We meet the family before the like apocalypse starts. I liked how almost immediately you got this sense of who Sid and her family are. They have these nuances, these shared memories, and you can feel how much all the characters love each other without them being like, "Hey, I love you, mom. Oh my god, I love you, Sid." Like, we just see it in the ways that they interact. And the sibling banter between Sid, Maddie, and Ella is so believable. And their relationships aren't just like one dimensional. They aren't like just bickering siblings. They don't just have like unconditional love for each other. Like they do both of those things, but the balance I feel like is really good. And each of the siblings, Maddie and Ella, have their own backstory that is again disconnected from Sid. Like Ella has a daughter who she shares with this guy that kind of sucks and has to have family dinners with him even though they broke up just because they want their daughter to have some sense of like normalcy. And Sid is completely removed from that. It's not like she goes to the family dinners with her. In fact, that matters so little to the story. The only purpose it really serves is just to make sure that Ella and the parents and Ella's daughter are out of the house when the fault line opens. But like, they could have been going to the grocery store or really anything else. There didn't need to be that much backstory behind Ella, but it just made the character feel so grounded and connected to reality. To have all the other characters have these elaborate backstories that Sid, the main character, is completely removed from. I liked knowing who these people were separate from the story. Even the antagonist was good. This will be kind of spoilery because we don't learn who the antagonist is or why they're doing what they do until further into the story. But first of all, I hate Paul Ford. All my homies hate Paul Ford. Basically, Paul Ford is the guy that opened the fault line because he's greedy. He is more than that. The way I phrased it does make him seem a little one dimensional. But even though we don't know that much about his backstory, I feel like his character really reinforces the themes of the book. One thing that the book talks a lot about is that power doesn't change people, it just kind of reveals who they are. And in the book, power means like superpowers. But like, if I can, the curtains aren't just blue here for a second. We can like extrapolate this to the real world and use power as like a sense of control or influence. And in that sense, it also works. Power doesn't change people, it just reveals who they truly are. But to summarize all of that, the characters were so enjoyable that I missed them when I finished reading the book. It kind of felt like hanging out with a group of friends and then going home. Like, that was really fun, but now I miss you guys. The magic system is really intriguing and well built into the story. There was once magic, but we don't have it anymore. It was sealed underground somehow because people were misusing it. And then there are these guardians, and they each have a key, and the key can open the ground where the magic is stored. But in the meantime, there are these fault lines, which are basically seams of the earth where the magic was stuffed into. And on these fault lines, magic can seep through, which is why Wellesley is a tourist town. I think the clearest example of the magic seeping through in Wellesley is that when it rains, there are these like rainbow shimmery ghosts that float up from the fault line, which sounds pretty cool. I would probably go to this town and be a tourist there. I liked how magic wasn't presented as a gift without consequence. Through the characters we see interacting with the magic, we see that using it is exhausting, dangerous, and often tied to loss. Guardians are also not like a government sanctioned thing. They don't operate like the police, for example. Each guardian is an anonymous person that can pass on the guardianship responsibility to a different person. Guardians are also not your typical chosen ones. Well, so let me retract the chosen one thing, because they literally are chosen by their predecessor. They aren't chosen ones in that, like, there's this great prophecy and they're the only ones that can fit into it. But rather, they are chosen by someone who's trusting them enough to give them a key to magic. Along with the responsibility of keeping track of an actual, like, physical key, the Guardians are also the only people in the world who still possess some small form of magic. They each get one superpower, which is super cool, and they range in, like, power level. For example, one character can breathe underwater, while the other one can turn anything they draw into reality. And I liked that the powers weren't like randomly given out. Like I said before, power doesn't change you, it just reveals who you truly are. And so their like superpowers that they get are tied directly to who they are. Like, for example, the person that can draw and their drawings come into the real world, they were an artist, which isn't like the most creative jump, but it's the first one that came to mind. I just liked how this magic system was both very structured and also kind of chaotic. Like, it's structured in the sense that there are these people that have a lot of responsibility to guard magic, but because of the nature of magic, it's very chaotic and confusing, and there's no way to really like actually regulate it. I liked it. Despite its dark subject matter, the novel still is very funny. Sid's character is a majority of this. She has a lot of funny habits, like she names all of the shells she runs into. She mistakes someone reaching down to help her up to be a high five moment. She provides a lot of moments of levity that keep the story from becoming too heavy. The dialogue is very sharp and natural, and the pacing of the book really keeps the reader engaged the whole time. I didn't find any spots where I felt like the story was really dragging, and it didn't ever feel like there were too many action scenes one after another. Like, something would happen with a lot of action, and then we would have time to breathe. And that really helped with making the series of events that happens feel plausible. The elements of horror, fantasy, and coming of age felt very blended and not disjointed. I obviously like this book, but I feel like I just gotta say again, I think this author did a really good job. I think one of the strongest elements of this novel was its thoughtful representation. Sid's experience as a transracial adoptee is handled with a lot of nuance and care. It's woven very naturally into the narrative and isn't treated like her one defining trait. Like, she does mention it on occasion, but it's not like the only thing she talks about. She has these feelings of being loved, but still being other, and has this feeling of not fully fitting into the picture. And these feelings don't go away just in the face of the apocalypse. I read up on the author Robin Wasley, and according to this interview I read in Utopia's State of Mind, she grew up in a family of adoptees. This made a lot of sense because Sid felt so authentic. I am not adopted. I also grew up in a town where people looked very similar to me, and I've never had a problem finding myself represented in books. And I could just tell by the way that Sid is written that her thoughts and feelings are coming from experiences that the author had. In the article, she says, I always knew I wanted my main character to be a transracial Korean American adoptee, and I always wanted to convey that this is an Asian American experience. The author also didn't want the story to be about being adopted. It was just the backstory for this character. Stories about being adopted and about being transracially adopted, especially, are important. I also think that stories where the character has this backstory and it isn't treated as their one defining aspect is also important. I really liked reading this like fantasy, sci-fi, horror novel and having a unique perspective. Because, yeah, the book was about a magical apocalypse, but we got to see it through Sid's eyes. And the narrator is obviously the most important person in the novel. I'm not breaking any headlines here, but representation is just so important. Like the author says in the interview, she couldn't find a lot of books where a character had a backstory similar to hers when she was growing up. I'm not exactly the person to like talk on this subject because, like I said, I've never had this issue, but I can really appreciate it for what it is. This book didn't feel like it was over 400 pages. I genuinely do not understand how this book isn't trending everywhere. It managed to feel like a love letter to YA fiction, while also being very fresh and imaginative for the genre. It combined magic zombies, found family, meaningful representation, humor, deeply heartfelt conversations, and other YA tropes like, oh my god, it's the apocalypse, but what if I found somebody that I love? I really liked it. Sid is a protagonist who's going to stay with me for a while. I once again emailed an author because of how much I loved their book. I will let y'all know if she emails me back. Obviously 5 stars. I have to film this outro again because the first time I didn't click record for some reason. Here's a clip of me tapping the record button thinking I clicked to stop recording, in which I was very surprised. Thank you for watching this whole video. I appreciate it. Let me know in the comments which of the 3 books was your favorite. Dead Things Are Closer Than They Appear is the correct answer. And please leave any suggestions of books that you think I would like to read. My TBR list is quite extensive at this point. I have 2 whole bookcases filled with books that I have not yet read, and I keep checking out books from the library only to have to return them before I'm done reading them because I read so slowly and I try to read too many things at once. I'm actively reading 3 books right now and passively reading a lot more in the background. On Storygraph, I am allegedly currently reading 12 books. If you read A Night in the Lonesome October during October and actually kept pace with the calendar, please let me know if it felt like homework. And if it did, how do you get past that? I hate homework so much. I have been out of school now for almost 5 years, and I still have nightmares about not doing my homework. When I was a sophomore in high school, I literally had over 80 missing assignments in just my math class. I have such an apprehension to doing homework. I hate it. but if it would make the book more enjoyable, I could perhaps convince myself to. I will be having a video coming out soon about all the books I read in 2025, so look forward to that. I will see you next time. Bye!